and power. Let thy blessing fall on me. I surrender all. I surrender all to thee, my blessed Savior. I surrender all. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Just set up here. All right. Hopefully that'll come on. Yeah. We're good. All right. So good to see you all this morning. If you would bow with me, we'll have a word of prayer and then we'll go into our Bible class. Dear Heavenly Father, we are so grateful to you, Father, for the tremendous amount of love that you have given us and continue to give us, and for all the multitude of blessings that are beyond what we can count. Please help us to focus on those things, Father, and just help us to remember how much you love us and all that you've done for us. We're thankful, Father, that we live in a free country where we have the ability to come together like this with like-minded Christians and to study another portion of your word. We're thankful that you have given us your word, Father, and we know that you have said that we can understand it. And so as we study through this, help us to have the proper understanding, help us to rightly divide thy word, and so we would gather from it the things that you would have us to know. Help us to not just hear these words, Father, but help us to apply them to our everyday walks of life so that we can be very pleasing in thy sight. We're mindful of all those that are on our continuing prayer list. All of us have family members or friends or people that we know that are struggling with various health issues, and we pray for them, for those that wait upon them, and we ask, Father, if it be thy will, that you would restore them to a better portion of health. As we go through this period of Bible study again, we pray that for this period and for the worship service to follow, that everything that is said and done here this morning is in accordance with thy will and will be well-pleasing in thy sight. We're thankful for all things, Father, but especially we're thankful for Jesus and his sacrifice on the cross for the redemption of our sins. And it's in his name that we pray. Amen. If you would be turning to Genesis chapter 19, we should be able to finish up chapter 19 today. We'll see, we might get started a little in chapter 20. See where we get to. So we left off last time. We noticed the destruction of those 4 cities because of all their wickedness. We saw that Lot and his wife and his 2 daughters were escorted out by the angels, but his wife looked back, and so she was punished for that because God had told them not to look back. So only Lot and his 2 unmarried daughters, they were the only 3 that got out of that city of, again, tens of thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands of people located in those cities, and you had 3 people that got out. And so we noticed that Lot had requested to go to Zoar. He was allowed to do that. Then when he got there, he was afraid there as well, and so he finally headed into the mountains. And he and his 2 daughters settled into a cave, which is where they were living. And so that is where we left off. And so we're going to look next at another bad episode here involving Lot and his 2 daughters. And this is verses 31 through 38 as we close out this chapter. So let's read that and we'll discuss. And the firstborn said unto the younger, these are his 2 daughters, Our father is old, and there is not a man in the earth to come in unto us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. And they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in, and lay with her father, and he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. And it came to pass on the morrow that the firstborn said unto the younger, Behold, I lay yesternight with my father. Let us make him drink wine this night also, and go thou in and lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. And they made their father drink wine that night also, and the younger arose and lay with him, and he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. Thus were both the daughters of Lot with child by their father. And the firstborn bare a son, and called his name Moab, the same as the father of the Moabites unto this day. And the younger, she also bare a son, and called his name Ben-Ami, the same as the father of the children of Ammon unto this day. So here we see again another incident of not trusting in God. Of course, this is really the daughters more so than it is Lot, but they, instead of trusting God to work things out, they decide to take matters into their own hands. Now, who does that sound like? Sarah, right? When Sarah said, we've been waiting a long time, and maybe God needs a little help. Look, here, I'm going to bring Hagar in, and you could have a son through her. When Sarah should have just believed in God. But so this is kind of a similar situation. So they become convinced for whatever reason, and they would have known because they've gone to Zor, so they would have known that God didn't destroy the whole world. It's not like he killed every man on the planet. So there were still other men, but they have somehow convinced themselves that there was no really anybody that they could marry. Not only then, but again, well, what about maybe a month from now, or 6 months from now, or a year from now? The right candidate might show up, but they convinced themselves that wasn't going to happen. So we've got to make sure that since all of Lot's other children died out, and we're not married, and if we die out, then his seed will die. So we got to make sure that we keep the family going. Okay, so they take this upon themselves. And so the oldest daughter, she suggests to the younger daughter that they commit incest with their father so that they can conceive and have children and carry on the family. Okay? Now, for these two girls to even consider doing this, what does that kind of tell you, along with our theme that we've been talking about? What does that kind of tell you about them?
They're not following God.
They're not following God, right? And so do you think maybe they also, at least somewhat, had been corrupted by all the wickedness around them in Sodom? Yeah, apparently they had. And so we've talked about, what a tragic thing this was that, Lot basically sees almost his whole family destroyed because he made that really bad decision to go live there. Instead of when Abraham said, look, you pick any place in Canaan you want. I'll give you the best land. I'll go in the other direction. And yet he went to Sodom. So he's still suffering the consequences of doing that. So apparently they had at least been somewhat corrupted by this, that they thought this would be an acceptable thing to do. Again, instead of trusting in God. And so something that's kind of obvious here, again, as we focus back on Lot himself, what do we see about him in this?
He's drunk.
Okay, they got him drunk. Why'd they get him drunk?
He's old.
He was old.
They wanted him to flee.
Yeah. Does it seem like that he would have done this if he'd been sober? Probably not, right? So that's why the oldest daughter said, we need to get him drunk. Why? Because he wouldn't have done that without. So you still see among the mistakes that Lot has made, he's still a righteous man. He's still trying to live for God. So apparently he would have never consented to do something like that. But they decide, well, we're going to get him to drink all this wine. And notice where it says, like in verse 32, come let us make our father drink wine. You think they forced him? Probably not. You can't really force somebody to drink alcohol. It's not like they held him down and put a funnel in his mouth, and So he Again, Lot is not a perfect man, so that's the mistake on his part that he makes, is that he's going to drink this alcohol. That's the sin that he commits, because he's going to get drunk because he drank so much of it. So look at Proverbs 23. And Lot would have known that God had warned about this, and there's a lot of places we could look at. Proverbs 23, beginning in verse 31. Look not thou upon the wine when it is red, when it giveth his color in the cup, when it moveth itself aright. At the last it biteth like a serpent, and stingeth like an adder. Thine eyes shall behold strange women, and thine heart shall utter perverse things. So God is talking about the dangers of alcohol, and especially if you drink a lot of it, you're going to get drunk, and you're going to do all kinds of things that normally you would not do if you were sober. Because one of the things it does is it lowers people's inhibitions. You get alcohol in your system, it lowers your inhibitions. And so things you normally would never do, you're probably going to do that under the influence, okay? And the daughters apparently knew that. This is what we need to do to make sure that we can pull this off, because otherwise he wouldn't do it, okay? But it does show that Lot still had some moral character, that he would not have consented to what their plan was and what they wanted. If they had told him, hey, I think we need to do this, they at least certainly felt that Lot would have told them, no, we're not going to do that. You just need to be patient. God will bring somebody. If it's his will that the family continue, God will bring somebody, so don't worry about it. That's probably what Lot would have said to him, but they go about this plan. So they do. The older daughter goes in. It says Lot was not even aware when she came in, when she left. He probably didn't even remember it the next day. And then the next night, the younger daughter goes in, same thing. He doesn't even remember it. And so both of the girls do conceive, and both of the girls are going to have a son. Okay? And so the older daughter, she has a son. She names him Moab. And this is appropriate because Moab means from a father. Of course, every baby comes from a father, but, with this, it's extra. It's like from her father. It's where she got this boy. And so he's going to be the founder or the father of the Moabite nation. And you read a lot more about them as you go through the Bible. Okay, and then the younger daughter, she also has a son. She names him Ben-Ami. Also appropriate, it means son of my kinsman. So son of a close relative, right? Which of course this was. So he is going to be the founder or father of the Ammonite nation. Not to be confused with the Amorites, because you read a lot about them in the Bible as well, but that's the Ammonites and the Amorites, two different groups. Okay? But say them quickly together a lot and you get your tongue tied on that. But these are the two boys that is going to come out of this union that these girls put together, but God did not sanction, and he would have never sanctioned them to do this. So, do you think, even if you hadn't read anything, and I know a lot of y'all, you've read the Bible, and you probably know, but even if you hadn't read it, things in future event, do you think there'll be consequences for this? Oh, there will be, right? God's not going to let that go. Now, he's going to do some things because of Lot, but there's also going to be some negative consequences, okay? So there's going to be a little bit of positivity for Lot's sake, which again shows me that Lot was still somebody, even though he was a sinner and he stumbled, but overall he was trying to be a righteous man. So God is going to give him some consideration. But we're going to see a lot of consequences from this. So let's look at these two groups just for a minute. So you've got the Moabites and the Ammonites. And what we're going to notice as you continue to read through the Old Testament, you look at the history of the children of Israel, what you're going to see is that the Israelites will very often have violent confrontations with these two groups. These two are kind of going to be a thorn in the side of the Israelites. Okay? And so again, because they came out of this wicked plan, and this was not something that God wanted. And so the Israelites and these two, they're going to butt heads and they're going to go at each other a lot. Okay? It's going to cause all kinds of problems. Now, the one thing that God will do for them, for the Ammonites and the Moabites, specifically because they came from Lot, again, shows us that God had strong affection for Lot. So in spite of his mistakes, he was still a man that was trying to live for God. And so again, the lesson for us is nobody's perfect. None of us can be perfect. We're going to talk about that a little bit today in our sermons. But we're supposed to be striving to serve God. And then when we stumble, we need to repent. We need to fix it. But God knows we're going to stumble. Okay, so in spite of that, God still had a great deal of affection and acceptance of Lot, because overall he was this righteous man. So we want to see, what does God do regarding these two boys because of Lot's sake? Well, if you will, turn over to the book of Deuteronomy. We're going to look at 2 or 3 passages here in Deuteronomy, because we're not told here in Genesis. Doesn't tell us anything about what God does for these boys, but we see this in Deuteronomy. But he doesn't do it for them so much. He's doing it for Lot's sake, because they are Lot's sons. So Deuteronomy 2 and verse 9, we see, "And the Lord said unto me, distress not the Moabites." In other words, don't try to fight them. There's still going to be some conflicts, but God is telling the Israelites, don't fight them. Okay? Distress not the Moabites, neither contend with them in battle. For I will not give thee of their land for a possession, because I have given Ar unto the children of Lot for a possession. So what's God telling them there? Yeah, leave them alone, basically. What about the land that they have? Can the Israelites go and conquer it? No. Well, what about the land of Canaan? There's a whole bunch of people living in Canaan. Can they conquer that? Oh yeah, because God's going to give them that, right? But he's saying right here, I'm not going to give you the land that I gave to the sons of Moab, the children of Moab. That's theirs. I'm going to give you the land of Canaan, what I promised Abraham, but you're not to touch their land. In fact, God is saying, I won't let you take it. Okay? If you try to take it from them, you're going to lose. You need to take what I tell you to take. And I'm telling you, you're not going to do that. Now, why does he do that? Again, it's for Lot's sake. That's why he does this. Now, skip ahead 10 verses to chapter 2 and verse 19. And we see the same thing is true of the descendants of Ben-Ammi. Okay? And when thou comest nigh over against the children of Ammon, distress them not, nor meddle with them. For I will not give thee of the land of the children of Ammon any possession, because I have given it unto the children of Lot for a possession. Okay? So both of these boys that come out of this union, for Lot's sake, God is going to give them both a territory that they can control, and he will protect that territory from outside invaders, even from the Israelites. And he said, you can't take that land. Now, here's the negative part, because there has to be a negative consequence for this also. And the Ammonites and the Moabites, they're going to turn out, as you can imagine, to be very wicked people. And of course, God knows that. So we see, if you'll go to Deuteronomy 23 and verse 3, God also makes a decree. Well, I'm going to give them this land, and they're going to be able to keep that land, but they will never be allowed to become the children of God. They're not going to become part of the Israelite nation. God said, I won't allow it, because he knows how wicked they are. Now, Deuteronomy 23 and verse 3, an Amorite or Moabite shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord, even to their 10th generation shall they not enter into the congregation of the Lord forever. Okay, so God is banishing them from being part of his people, because he knows how bad they're going to be. And that's going to lead to a source of a lot of conflict between the two. But God is telling the Israelites, look, if you try to go in and take their land, I'm not going to let you take it. You can defend yourselves. If they come and they attack you and they bother you, you can defend yourself, but you're not to go molest them in any way. Just try to leave them alone. because God knew there'd be a lot of conflicts between the two. So he's telling his people, you need to do your best to stay away from them and just leave them alone. There's still going to be conflict in spite of that, but that's what they're commanded to do. Okay? Now, something kind of interesting here about this is, so you get to verse 38, the end of this chapter, Genesis chapter 19. This is where we leave Lot's story. Okay? We don't really read anything new about him after this. I mean, there's very little about him after this, just about other people like Peter mentioning his name. That's it. So what happened to Lot after this particular incident? They're living in a cave. His daughters conceive his children. What happens to him after that?
He probably died.
Yeah, eventually he's going to die, right? But we don't know what happened to him after that because we're not told. You know, some questions I have, like, did Abraham ever see him again? Don't know. Did Abraham even know that Lot survived the destruction of Sodom? We don't know. The Bible doesn't say. Those are questions I have. I wonder if they ever saw each other or if Abraham even knew that he survived. I don't know. When did Lot die? Where did he die? Because we're told, a lot of Bible Old Testament characters, we're told that when he died, where he died. We're going to see that with Abraham and most all these others. What about Lot? We're not told. We're not told anything about this. We simply don't know because the Bible doesn't say. So it's a very abrupt right here. It just, Lot's been somewhat of a focus of this story, and then it just like cuts him off right here. Now God is going to, as we go into chapter 20, is going to go back and all the focus is going to be on Abraham again, and Lot's not even mentioned anymore. So that's just kind of interesting how that plays out. So Lot, as we've said, in a lot of ways, he's a tragic figure. He's a man who was trying to be righteous. He's trying to serve God, but he's also an imperfect man who stumbles on quite a few occasions and makes some really bad decisions. Who does that sound like? Yeah, sound like me, right? I really am trying to live for God, but I'm certainly not perfect. I wish I was. My wife wishes I was, but I'm not, right? And so I make mistakes and I do wrong things, and we all do, right? So Lot is just a normal human being, but he's better than most because for most of the time, he's trying to live righteously for God with the mistakes that he makes. Okay, but we know, we've often referenced this passage. Let's go read it. 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 7 and 8. We don't know where he died. We don't know when he died. Don't know how he died. But we do know what his spiritual state was when he died. We know that. How do you know that? You said it didn't say anything after Genesis 19. Well, Peter tells us. 2 Peter 2, verses 7 and 8. Notice what Peter has to say about Lot. And he's talking about Sodom and Gomorrah. And delivered just Lot, vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked. For that righteous man dwelling among them, in seeing and hearing, vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. Okay? So Peter's telling us first, he said Lot was a just man. Peter says Lot was a righteous, specifically says he was a righteous man. Said he had a righteous soul. Now Peter wouldn't have said that if Lot had died in a lost condition. If Lot had, after his daughters did this, if he'd gone off the deep end, Peter wouldn't be making those comments. Well, Lot was a righteous man with a righteous soul. So we know that he, at this point in Genesis 19, even in spite of his mistakes, God considered him righteous, and so he died in that condition, and good for him, right? And so we're told a little bit about him from Peter here, and notice he says he was vexed. Lot was vexed with the filthy conversation. Later on, he vexed his righteous soul from day to day. What does it mean if somebody is vexed? You may know what that means. He is grief-stricken. He is upset. He is anguished over this. When you're vexed, I mean, you are deeply troubled about something. That's the kind of stuff that you can't sleep, and it's driving you crazy. And so Peter says, yeah, Lot was vexed by the Sodomites, all the people he was living around. So we're told there, and you kind of see it from Genesis, but Peter confirms that. It wasn't like when Lot was living there, he's looking around and going, oh, isn't that cute? Look at all the wicked stuff they're doing. Well, as long as I'm not doing it, it's fine if they do it. No, it bothered him to see all this immorality going on around him. And so it bothered him so much that it vexed him, is the way Peter describes it. So he was deeply disturbed by all the stuff that he saw going on around him. And obviously we just saw what happened in this chapter. So what did it cost him? His family, right? Almost all of it. It cost him his family. So he probably had a lot of those things running through his mind, right? And it does beg the question when it says, he vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds, right? So every day, Lot is looking around him, and I can't believe these people are this evil, they're this wicked, they do all these horrible things. And so for me, that begs a question. Why didn't you leave? Pack up your suitcases and go, right? And I don't know, because the Bible doesn't say. It obviously bothered him living there. Again, it's not like he just didn't care. It bothered him, and he had to have known this is going to corrupt my children, right? And yet, he didn't leave. Now, here's the thing. And we were just having a conversation about this Friday night in relation to another, had nothing to do with Lot, but we were talking about something else. And we were talking to Jacob about certain things and trying to caution him about, because let me ask this question. Are we supposed to judge people? Yeah, we have to, right? But what kind of judgment? Righteous judgment, right? Don't be a hypocrite, right? And so part of what righteous judgment means is we got to have all the facts. We need all our ducks in a row, right? So if I see you rob a bank, steal the money, shoot and kill the teller, I mean, I saw you do that myself. Can I call you a thief? Yes. Can I call you a murderer? Yeah, because I saw it, right? But if somebody accused you of doing that, I didn't see you do it. This person didn't, maybe 5 or 6 people have told this story by the time it gets to me. Well, I'm pretty sure she robbed that bank. And, should I then assume that that's what you did? No, because I don't have all the facts. Right? I need to withhold judgment and go, well, I don't really know what happened there. I know what the grapevine is saying, but the grapevine has been known to be less than accurate, right? So I might want to withhold my judgment unless I'm sure of my facts, right? And so we don't, when we look around us today, if we're absolutely positive that somebody's doing something wrong, then yeah, we're obligated to call that out. That's what God said, we have to do that, right? But I can't assume that somebody's doing something wrong just because of hearsay or just because maybe I have a feeling that they might be doing it, but I really don't know what I'm talking about. I don't need to be judging those people because we don't really know what their circumstances are, right? We all have issues in our lives. We all have things going on. You don't know what all is going on in my life, and I don't know what all is going on in your life. And again, I'm not even talking about sin necessarily, but sometimes it makes people do certain things, and you're not sure why they did it, but it's because you don't have all the information. So why didn't Lot leave? I don't know. It seems like he should have. Maybe there was a reason that in spite of all the wickedness, he thought, I need to stay here. Maybe he was trying to reach people. Maybe he was trying to study with people. Maybe he thought, this is where I'm needed because all these people are horrible. Maybe I can influence a few people for the good. We just don't have all the information. So we do want to be careful of, pointing the finger at Lot and judging him. You should have left. I can't believe you didn't leave. Because that's what I think he should have left, but maybe he had a good reason. I don't know what that is, but maybe he had a good reason for not leaving. But which is to me what makes him a tragic figure. You know, he's not somebody that's deliberately trying to do wrong things. He's trying to do the right thing and just keeps tripping over himself. You know, and so we can all relate to that in some aspect. So I have a lot of sympathy for Lot. I have a lot of compassion for him that, you know, he just made some mistakes and a lot of people suffer for that. So anyway, that brings us to the end of chapter 19. So we've got a few minutes. We can sort of look a little bit at chapter 20. Okay, so as we said, now the story shifts away from Lot. There's really no more mention of Lot in Genesis. And now it goes back to Abraham. And we've been talking about Abraham since chapter 12. That's basically when we were introduced to him. And that will continue through about chapter 25, when he's the focus of the narrative. So chapter 20, now notice, so after Sodom is destroyed, we saw that Abraham looked in that direction. And what did he see? He said it looked like a furnace, right? He could see that. And again, all this is running through his mind. Did Lot make it out? Did his family make it out? He doesn't know. They can't text each other, you know. He doesn't know what's going on. So this is right after that. So Abraham decides to leave where he's been. So let's look at the first 7 verses. Okay? And we'll see some things that sound familiar here. And Abraham journeyed from thence toward the south country, and dwelled between Kadesh and Shur, and sojourned in Gerar. And Abraham said of Sarah his wife, She is my sister. And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night, and said to him, Behold, thou art but a dead man, for the woman which thou hast taken, for she is a man's wife. But Abimelech had not come near her. And he said, Lord, wilt thou slay also a righteous nation? Said he not unto me, She is my sister? And even she herself said, He is my brother. In the integrity of my heart and innocency of my hands have I done this. And God said unto him in a dream, Yea, I know that thou did this in the integrity of thy heart, for I also withheld thee from sinning against me, therefore suffered I thee not to touch her. Now therefore restore the man his wife, for he is a prophet, and he shall pray for thee, and thou shalt live. And if thou restore her not, know thou that thou shalt surely die, thou and all that are thine. Okay? So let's go back to verse 1 there. So Abraham had been living in what was called the plain of Mamre. He'd been living there for years, where he had settled in the land of Canaan. And so he decides, for whatever reason, we're not told, that did God tell him to do this? Did he just decide? We don't know. We're not told. All it says, he decided to pack up and go. And so he heads south, and he winds up in this city called Gerar. And this is in the Arabian Peninsula. It's almost all the way down into Egypt. So it's quite a ways from where he was living. Okay, and so he takes this trip with all his family and his livestock, and you know, they pack up and they go down there. Again, we're not told why, but he does. Maybe he wanted to get away from Sodom's vicinity. Maybe God gave him a lot of bad memories, and I don't know what happened to Lot. We're not told, but for whatever reason, he wants to go. So he heads down there, and this is a city, you might recognize the name of it. We're not told here, but you know, history tells us who lived there. Well, the people who lived in the city of Gerar were, see if you've heard of these people before, the Philistines. Okay? Remember David and Goliath, right? Goliath was the Philistine champion, right? So that's where Abraham has gone. He's now living among the Philistines. And so obviously later on, they're going to be bitter enemies. There's going to be a lot of conflict between the Israelites and the Philistines. Okay, but this is where he goes to at this point. And noticing at the end of verse 1 there, it says he sojourned in Gerar. Well, what does that mean to sojourn? Well, it means that this was not Lot. This was not Abraham's intended destination. In other words, he didn't say, we're going to move to Gerar, we're going to live there permanently. Sojourn means, in his mind, he thought this would be a temporary stay. We're going to, like if we're traveling across country, we stop somewhere to spend the night. That's not our destination, but we're just breaking the trip up.
So the idea was, well, we'll stop here for a little while, and then maybe we're going to move on. That's what he intended to do. And we'll see how that plays out. Okay? Now, you get into verse 2. Have we seen this before? Okay? Here we go again with the whole she's my sister routine. He's already tried that. And as we're going to see, that's really a pattern with these two. It's not just an isolated incident. So, and we noticed the first time this happened was back in chapter 12 when they went down to Egypt. And then Pharaoh took her as his wife. You know, we remember that. So we looked ahead then. Well, I told you, let's go to chapter 20, and I want to show you something. So we noticed here that she is, in fact, his sister. So look at verse 12 here in chapter 20. And yet, indeed, she is my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother. Oh, and she became my wife. Yeah, let's throw that in there, right? Yeah. So, but in verse 2, he left that little part out, that little tidbit. Oh, by the way, we're married. Didn't mention that, right? But she was technically his sister because they both had the same father. So we'd say a half-sister, right? But as we're going to see, the way Abraham and Sarah looked at each other, the way they considered each other, it wasn't brother and sister. It was husband and wife. That was the most important part of their relationship. Well, both of them decided to leave that part out. That's kind of important, right? But they don't, and again, they did this before in Egypt. Now, does anybody remember, why did Abraham do that in Egypt? Why did he tell everybody, oh, she's my sister? Yeah, he's afraid. You know, my wife apparently she's a beautiful woman and somebody's going to kill me. Oh, she's already married? Well, let's just get the husband out of the way. And, you know, kind of like David did with the Hittite, right? Uriah the Hittite. Well, I want Bathsheba. I'll just get the husband out of the way. And then I feel like I have a right to marry her, right? So they're going to kill me if they find out that she's my wife. So I'm just going to tell everybody she's my sister. And Sarah agreed to go along with it. And she would tell them that, well, yeah, he's just my brother. So it's going to be for the same reason here. Abraham's afraid that the Philistines will kill him to get his wife. So he makes the same mistake that he's already done before. And it's been about 25 years since that episode in Egypt. But would you, and I'm the last person to talk about this, as forgetful as I am, right? But wouldn't you think he would remember how that went, even though it was 25 years ago? But wouldn't he remember how displeased God was with him for lying about this? And it didn't really work. I mean, he did get a lot of stuff. Pharaoh gave him a lot of stuff, and then they got ran out of the country, right? But God was very upset with him because what Abraham had demonstrated by saying, oh, she's my sister, because I'm afraid they're going to kill me. What did he demonstrate by that? He didn't have faith in God. Is God going to let the Egyptians kill you? Why do we know God would not have let that happen? The promise. How's Abraham going to sire a son if he's dead? Right? So Abraham should have put two and two together. Look, God said I'm going to have a son. It's a done deal. It's going to happen. So these people can't kill me. I don't have a son yet. So he should have, but he didn't. And so you would think even 25 years later, he'd remember, the last time I did this, God was really upset with me. And it's because I should have had faith that God was going to take care of me. What should he have right here? The same faith. God's got him. Because has he had Isaac yet? Nope. Right? So God's not going to let the Philistines kill him for his wife or for any other reason. God's going to protect him. He's got to have the son, right? So he should have thought the same thing, but he didn't. So again, he's having a weak moment. He gets scared. Well, let's just tell everybody that you're my sister. Okay? So the king here is a man. People think, well, he's named Abimelech. Actually, Abimelech is his title. Okay? The Philistines, that's what they called their kings. It was a title, Abimelech. Okay? And so this king, just like Pharaoh, he took Sarah to be his wife. He just thought, oh, well, she's just his sister. I think I'll marry her. So Abraham is going to find himself in the same boat that he was in Egypt. Okay? So we're going to put a peg in it right there and stop. And Lord willing, next time we'll see how this episode plays out. Because it starts out the same way, but there are going to be a few differences that we'll notice. So we'll take a break and then we'll have our worship service.